The candles flickered as Ilara moved silently through the grand hall, her slender frame casting no shadow against the stone walls of Blackmere Castle. Not that anyone would notice if it did. She had perfected the art of invisibility long ago, not by magic, but by necessity. Servants were meant to be unseen in the vampire court, but Ilara had mastered the skill beyond expectation. She existed as a ghost might, present yet absent, moving through the world without disturbing it. Frost-laced windows towered along the eastern wall, allowing thin ribbons of moonlight to slice through the otherwise oppressive darkness. The castle breathed around her, ancient stones exhaling cold air that carried the metallic scent of blood and the musk of aged parchment. Tonight, like all nights for the past 3 years, Ilara worked while the vampire nobility slumbered, polishing silver that ironically burned their skin, sweeping ashes from hearths where fires were lit not for warmth, but for the comfort of pretending life still animated their cold bodies. The hem of her grey dress brushed against the floor as she navigated between long tables where tomorrow night's feast would be held. 300 years of peace between the 5 vampire clans would be celebrated, with Queen Lysithea of the Blackmere clan hosting the centennial gathering. The air hummed with anticipation, even in these quiet hours. "You there," a voice hissed from the shadows, startling Ilara so severely she nearly dropped the silver candelabra she'd been polishing. "Fetch me blood, now." Lord Cassius, the Queen's cousin, emerged from an alcove, his pale face gaunt with hunger. His presence at this hour was unusual. Most nobles retired to their chambers well before dawn threatened the horizon. Ilara lowered her eyes and nodded, though she knew he wasn't truly seeing her. Nobody did. They saw a servant, a function, a means to an end. Never Ilara herself. "Yes, my lord," she whispered, placing the candelabra on a nearby table and hurrying toward the kitchens. The stone floors grew colder as she descended the winding staircase to the lower levels of the castle. The kitchen was a cavernous room, with hanging herbs that did little to mask the sweet iron smell of blood kept in ornate glass containers. Preserved through means Ilara preferred not to contemplate, these vessels stored the sustenance of Blackmere's nobility. As she selected a crystal decanter filled with crimson liquid, a familiar figure stepped from the pantry. "Up late again, ghost girl?" Thorn, the castle's head cook, offered a rare smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Unlike the others, Thorn acknowledged Ilara's existence, though even he didn't know her true name. Ghost Girl, he called her, for her ability to move through the castle unnoticed. "Lord Cassius requires refreshment," she responded, holding up the decanter. Thorn's smile vanished. "Be careful around that one. He's been in a foul mood since the announcement." "What announcement?" Thorn glanced around, though they were alone in the kitchen. "Queen Lysithea plans to name her successor tomorrow night. Word is, it won't be him." Ilara absorbed this information silently. Court politics rarely affected servants, except when they became collateral damage in noble squabbles. Still, Queen Lysithea's choice of successor would shape the future of Blackmere, and by extension, Ilara's life within its walls. "Thank you for the warning," she said, turning to leave. "Ilara," Thorn called, using her real name so rarely it sounded foreign to her ears. "Remember what I taught you. Eyes down, ears open. The invisible see everything." She nodded, a strand of copper hair escaping her tight bun as she hurried back upstairs. Thorn had been the one to teach her how to survive in a castle full of predators, by becoming invisible not just in body, but in presence. To breathe so softly none could hear, to step so lightly none could feel, to exist so minimally that even the keenest vampire senses overlooked her. When Ilara returned to the grand hall, Lord Cassius was pacing impatiently, his long black coat swept behind him like raven wings, and his fingers, adorned with silver rings that must have caused him constant discomfort, twitched at his sides. "Finally," he snarled, snatching the decanter from her hands. He didn't thank her. None of them ever did. Ilara backed away, returning to her duties as Lord Cassius drank deeply, crimson liquid staining his pale lips. As she retrieved the candelabra, she caught fragments of a whispered conversation from an adjoining corridor. "Absolutely certain the poison will be untraceable?" Lord Cassius's voice, though she had just left him drinking in the hall. Ilara froze. Her heart thundered in her chest, loud enough that she feared it might give her away. Carefully, she slid behind a heavy velvet curtain, straining to hear more. "The alchemist assured me," came the response from a voice she recognized as Lady Isolde, the Queen's handmaiden. "It mimics the wasting disease that took the Southern clan's leader last century. By the time suspicions arise, if they ever do, the succession will be complete. And you're certain you can access her private chambers? I've been serving her blood personally for decades. One more cup before tomorrow night's announcement, and the crown falls to you, my love." Their voices faded as they moved down the corridor, but Ilara remained hidden, her mind racing. A plot to assassinate Queen Lysithea. Tomorrow, before the succession announcement. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she considered the implications. The Queen was not kind, no vampire ruler could be. But under her reign, humans in Blackmere territories lived in relative peace. Lord Cassius, however, was known for his cruelty. Stories circulated among the servants of his private feedings, of humans drained not out of necessity, but for sport. Ilara stepped out from behind the curtain, her hands trembling. She should ignore what she'd heard. A servant's life depended on minding one's place, and interfering in noble affairs was a death sentence. Yet something burned in her chest, a sense of justice perhaps, or maybe just the desperate hope that doing the right thing might someday make her seen. Dawn was approaching, and the castle was settling into its daylight stillness. Ilara finished her duties mechanically, mind whirling with overheard plots and possible courses of action. By the time she retired to the servants' quarters, a cramped space she shared with 5 others who barely acknowledged her presence, she had made her decision. She would warn the Queen, but how does one who is invisible make herself seen, especially to a queen who had never once looked directly at her in 3 years of service? Exhaustion tugged at Ilara's limbs as she lay on her thin mattress, listening to the soft snores of the other servants. Sleep evaded her as she plotted, discarded ideas, and plotted again. Finally, as midday sun filtered through the single narrow window of their quarters, she drifted into uneasy slumber. Ilara woke to the sound of preparation, servants scurrying to prepare for the evening's momentous feast. She dressed quickly, her mind settled on a plan that felt as fragile as spun glass. The Queen's private chambers were located in the Eastern Tower, accessible only through a guarded corridor. Servants were permitted entry only when summoned or while performing specific duties. Ilara had cleaned these rooms before, but always under supervision and never when the Queen was present. As twilight approached, Ilara volunteered to deliver fresh linens to the royal wing. The head housekeeper, surprised by her initiative but too busy to question it, handed her a stack of silk sheets scented with lavender and blood orchids, the Queen's preference. The corridor to Queen Lysithea's chambers stretched before her, 2 guards standing at attention outside ornate double doors. Ilara approached with measured steps, eyes downcast as she had been taught. "Linens for Her Majesty," she murmured, voice soft and deferential. The guards exchanged glances. "The Queen is preparing for the feast. Leave them here." Ilara's heart sank. "The housekeeper instructed me to verify the positioning of Her Majesty's sleeping arrangement. The eastern exposure was troubling her last night." The lie came easily, born of desperation. The taller guard frowned. "We received no such instructions." "Perhaps they were overlooked in the preparations for tonight's festivities," Ilara suggested, risking a direct look at the guard. Such boldness from a servant was unexpected, momentarily confusing him. After a long moment, he grunted. "Be quick about it." Relief flooded her as the doors swung open. She stepped into an antechamber draped in burgundy silks. the air heavy with incense that masked the metallic scent of blood. Beyond lay the Queen's private chambers. Ilara moved forward cautiously, listening for any sound. The Queen's voice drifted from behind another door, her dressing room most likely, accompanied by Lady Isolde's deferential responses. Ilara's mouth went dry. The traitor was already with her target. Setting down the linens, Ilara crept closer to the dressing-room door, which stood slightly ajar. Through the narrow opening, she glimpsed Queen Lysithea seated at a vanity, her reflection absent from the mirror before her, one of many reminders of her undead state. Lady Isolde stood behind her, arranging the Queen's silver-white hair in an elaborate style befitting the night's importance. "The crimson gown, I think," the Queen was saying, her voice melodious despite the authority it carried. "A reminder of our life's sustenance as I announce my heir." "A wise choice, Your Majesty," Lady Isolde replied, her fingers weaving through the Queen's hair with practiced precision. "And perhaps before you dress, a small refreshment to fortify you for the evening ahead?" Ilara's breath caught. This was it, the moment of poisoning. Lady Isolde moved to a side table where a single crystal goblet waited, filled with dark liquid. She lifted it with reverence, turning back toward the Queen with deadly purpose disguised as service. Ilara had seconds to act. Her plan had been to somehow gain private audience with the Queen, to deliver her warning with evidence she didn't possess. Now, faced with the immediacy of the threat, such caution seemed a luxury. Drawing a deep breath, Ilara pushed the door open and stepped into the dressing room. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice stronger than she had ever permitted it to be in these halls. Both women turned, startled by the interruption. The Queen's eyes, violet and ancient, fixed on Ilara with confusion, as if unable to comprehend how a servant had materialized in her private chambers. "Who are you to enter unbidden?" Queen Lysithea demanded, rising from her seat with supernatural grace. Lady Isolde's expression shifted from surprise to cold fury. "A presumptuous servant who will be severely punished," she said, still holding the poisoned goblet. "Allow me to remove her before she disturbs your preparations further." "The drink is poisoned, Your Majesty," Ilara said quickly, pointing to the goblet in Lady Isolde's hands. "She and Lord Cassius plot your death before tonight's announcement." The room fell silent, a deadly stillness that made Ilara's skin prickle with fear. Lady Isolde recovered first, her laugh like breaking glass. "What nonsense is this? Your Majesty, this girl is clearly disturbed. Perhaps she seeks attention or favors through outlandish claims." Queen Lysithea's gaze remained fixed on Ilara, studying her with unsettling intensity. "You accuse my most trusted handmaiden of treason on the eve of our most sacred celebration," she stated, her voice dangerously calm. "What proof do you offer besides your word? You, whom I do not even recognize among my servants." Ilara swallowed hard. This was the moment she had feared, standing before power with nothing but truth that seemed improbable even to her own ears. "I overheard Lord Cassius and Lady Isolde discussing their plan in the corridor beyond the Grand Hall last night," she explained, fighting to keep her voice steady. "They spoke of an untraceable poison that mimics the wasting disease. They plan for him to claim the succession after your death." Lady Isolde's face transformed, beauty giving way to something feral. "Lies!" she hissed, setting down the goblet and advancing on Ilara. "Your Majesty, allow me to deal with this interruption." "Stay where you are, Isolde," the Queen commanded, and such was her power that Lady Isolde froze mid-step. The Queen turned back to Ilara. "You risk everything to bring this accusation. Why?" It was a question Ilara hadn't anticipated, yet the answer came unbidden. "Because it's right," she said simply, "and because Blackmere would suffer under Lord Cassius's rule." The Queen's expression remained unreadable for a long moment. Then, with deliberate slowness, she turned to Lady Isolde. "Drink," she ordered, gesturing to the abandoned goblet. Lady Isolde's composure cracked. "My Queen, surely you don't believe—" "Drink!" Queen Lysithea repeated, power resonating in that single word. If the servant speaks falsely, you have nothing to fear. Lady Isolde's gaze darted between the queen, the goblet, and the door. In that moment of hesitation, her guilt became undeniable. With a snarl of rage, she lunged not for the goblet, but for Ilara, hands outstretched like claws. "You wretched meddling nothing!" she shrieked. Ilara stumbled backward, but before Lady Isolde could reach her, the queen moved with preternatural speed, intercepting her handmaiden with one pale hand closed around her throat. "Your reaction confirms what your words would deny," Queen Lysithea said, her voice soft but terrible. "How long have you been plotting with Cassius, my dear Isolde? How long has your loyalty been a facade?" Lady Isolde struggled against the queen's grip, her beauty contorting with hatred. "He would have made me his queen," she spat, "instead of leaving me to serve for eternity while you reign endlessly." The queen's expression hardened. With a swift movement, she flung Lady Isolde across the room, where she crumpled against the wall. "Guards!" Queen Lysithea called, her voice penetrating stone as if it was silk. The door burst open, and the guards who had allowed Ilara entry rushed in, swords drawn. "Take Lady Isolde to the dungeons!" the queen commanded. "Find Lord Cassius and do the same. They are to be held until after tonight's announcement." As the guards seized the stunned Lady Isolde, the queen added, "And test that goblet for poison." When they had gone, Queen Lysithea turned her attention back to Ilara, who stood trembling but upright near the door. "You," she said, approaching with measured steps, "have done what no one has managed in 3 centuries of my rule." Ilara braced herself, unsure whether to expect reward or punishment for her interference. "You've surprised me," the queen continued, circling Ilara slowly. "A servant so unremarkable I have no memory of your face, yet you possess courage that shames many of my knights." She stopped directly before Ilara. "Tell me your name." "Ilara, your majesty." "Ilara," the queen repeated as if tasting the word. "You saved my life tonight, yet I sense you've been invisible to my court, perhaps deliberately so. Tonight, that changes." Before Ilara could respond, a guard returned, confirming that the drink indeed contained a rare poison, extracted from the nightshade that grew only in the forgotten crypts beneath the castle. "As I suspected," Queen Lysithea said, dismissing him with a wave. When they were alone again, she fixed Ilara with her ancient violet eyes. "The feast begins in 1 hour. You will attend, not as a servant, but at my side." Ilara's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, I don't understand." "Tonight, I announce my successor to the 5 clans," the queen explained, returning to her vanity to complete her preparations. "It seems I must also announce the treachery that nearly prevented it, and the unlikely savior who thwarted it." A small smile played at the corner of her lips. The invisible servant who saw everything. Ilara stood frozen, her world tilting on its axis. In one desperate act, she had transformed from unseen to central in the court's attention. The implications terrified her. "But, Your Majesty, I'm just a—" "No longer," Queen Lysithea interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. "What you are now, Ilara, is about to change dramatically." She gestured to an adjoining chamber Ilara had never entered. "Through there, you'll find suitable attire. Make yourself presentable. The Court of Blackmere awaits its newest addition." As Ilara moved numbly toward the indicated door, the queen's voice stopped her once more. "One question, Ilara. You mentioned Blackmere would suffer under Cassius's rule. Why would a human servant care about the fate of a vampire realm?" Ilara turned, meeting the queen's gaze directly for the first time. "Even the invisible have a stake in who wields power over them, Your Majesty." Something like respect flickered in Queen Lysithea's ageless eyes. "Indeed, how fascinating you are, Ilara. I suspect tonight marks only the beginning of your visibility in my court." With those words, hanging in the air between them, Ilara stepped through the door into a chamber of finery beyond her imagining. Wondering with equal parts fear and anticipation What transformation awaited her when she emerged? Part 2 of Ilara's story unfolded as she entered the Queen's private dressing chamber, a room she had never imagined entering as anything other than a cleaning servant. Golden light spilled from crystal chandeliers, illuminating walls draped with crimson silk and mirrors that reflected everything except the undead. The chamber smelled of night-blooming flowers and ancient perfumes, scents too rich for servants' quarters. A woman waited inside, not a vampire, but a human attendant, her eyes widening at Ilara's appearance. "Her Majesty sent you?" the woman asked, looking Ilara up and down with disbelief. "Yes," Ilara replied, her voice small in the opulent space. The attendant nodded briskly. "Then we haven't much time. The feast begins within the hour." What followed was a transformation unlike anything Ilara had experienced. The attendant, Mira she called herself, worked with swift efficiency, first drawing a bath scented with oils Ilara couldn't name, then helping her wash away the years of servant's dust that seemed embedded in her very skin. Ilara's copper hair, freed from its severe bun, fell in waves to her waist, surprising even herself with its length and luster once properly cleaned. "You have remarkable features," Mira commented, applying creams and subtle cosmetics to Ilara's face. Hidden beneath all that invisibility, Ilara remained silent, overwhelmed by the strangeness of being seen, truly seen after so long in the shadows. The gown Mira presented was midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like stars against a dark sky. It fit as though crafted for her, though Ilara couldn't imagine when such measurements had been taken. "The Queen has an eye for these things," Mira explained, noting Ilara's confusion. "One look at you, and she knew." When Mira finally guided Ilara to a full-length mirror, the reflection stunned her into silence. The woman staring back was not the ghost girl who had haunted Blackmere's halls. This woman stood tall, her eyes green as spring leaves, bright and alert in a face no longer hidden behind a servant's careful blankness. The gown accentuated curves Ilara had spent years disguising beneath shapeless grey dresses. "I don't recognize myself," she whispered. Mira smiled, adjusting a final silver pin in Ilara's hair. Perhaps that was the point. A soft knock interrupted them, and Queen Lysithea entered, now resplendent in her crimson gown. She paused, observing Ilara with satisfaction. "From shadow to light," the Queen remarked. "You clean up rather well for someone who has spent years ensuring no one noticed her." Ilara dipped into a curtsy, the movement awkward in her new attire. "Thank you, Your Majesty." "Stand straight," the Queen commanded. "Tonight, you walk beside me, not behind. You must look the part." "May I ask what part that is exactly?" Ilara ventured, the Queen's lips curved in a smile that revealed the tips of her fangs. "For now, my honored guest, the human who prevented an assassination. Beyond that," she gestured dismissively, "we shall see what the night brings." As they left the chamber, Ilara found herself struggling to match the Queen's gliding pace in her new shoes, delicate silver slippers that pinched her toes accustomed to practical servants' boots. "Your Majesty," Ilara began hesitantly as they approached the grand hall, "the nobles will question my presence." "Let them question," the Queen replied coolly. "It is not their place to understand my decisions, merely to accept them." The grand hall had transformed since Ilara had last seen it. Hundreds of candles burned in silver holders, casting dancing light across tables laden with ornate goblets and plates. Flowers and dark foliage twined around pillars, and banners representing the 5 vampire clans hung from the vaulted ceiling. The hall buzzed with conversation as vampire nobility from across the realm mingled, their pale faces animated with the rare excitement of reunion. All fell silent as the massive doors opened to admit Queen Lysithea. Heads turned, then eyes widened as they registered the Queen's unusual companion. Ilara felt the weight of hundreds of immortal gazes upon her, assessing, curious, and in some cases hostile. The queen proceeded to her throne on the dais at the head of the hall, gesturing for Ilara to take a seat at her right hand, a position of highest honor that caused audible murmurs throughout the assembly. "My esteemed guests," Queen Lysithea addressed the hall, her voice carrying effortlessly to every corner. "Welcome to Blackmere Castle on this historic night. Before we begin our celebration of 3 centuries of peace among our clans, I must share news of a plot uncovered this very evening. A conspiracy to end my reign through poison." Gasps and hisses of outrage rippled through the crowd. The queen raised a hand for silence. "Lord Cassius, my own blood relative, and Lady Isolde, my trusted handmaiden, now await judgment in our dungeons for this treachery. Their scheme was thwarted by this human," she gestured to Ilara, "who risked her life to warn me of their intentions." All eyes turned to Ilara, who fought the instinct to shrink beneath their scrutiny. She spotted Thorn near one of the side entrances, his expression a mixture of shock and concern. "Tonight," the queen continued, "Ilara sits in a place of honor as my guest. I expect her to be treated with appropriate respect." From the crowd, a tall vampire with auburn hair stepped forward, his bearing regal despite the scar that bisected his left cheek. He wore the silver and black colors of the northern clan. "Queen Lysithea," he said, his voice deep and measured, "while we celebrate your safety, many of us find ourselves curious about this human. How did a servant come to overhear such treasonous plotting? And why would she risk Cassius's wrath to report it?" "An excellent question, Lord Darius," the queen replied. "Perhaps you should ask her yourself." Ilara's heart hammered as Lord Darius turned his piercing gaze upon her. Unlike the dismissive glances of Blackmere's nobles, his eyes held genuine curiosity. "Well, human," he prompted, "how did you accomplish what the Queen's royal guards could not?" Ilara swallowed, finding her voice. "When no one sees you, my lord, you see everything." Lord Cassius and Lady Isolde spoke freely, believing themselves alone. "The gift of invisibility," Lord Darius mused. "A rare talent indeed, particularly for one so—" His eyes traveled over her transformed appearance. "Noticeable." The feast began after the Queen's announcement, though the succession revelation, the night's intended focal point, remained unspoken. Servants brought forth goblets of blood for the vampire guests, while special dishes were prepared for the few humans present, diplomats and special guests of the clans. Ilara sat stiffly, aware of the stares still directed her way. A servant, one she had worked alongside just yesterday, placed a plate before her with downcast eyes, then hurried away. The role reversal was disorienting. "You haven't touched your food," the queen observed after some time. "I find my appetite diminished, your majesty," Ilara replied quietly. "Understandable. The transition from shadow to spotlight can be jarring." The queen sipped from her goblet. "Tell me, Ilara, in your years of invisibility, what have you learned about my court?" Ilara hesitated, weighing her response. "That power is currency, that alliances shift like sand, that secrets are both weapon and shield." Astute observations. The queen studied her with renewed interest. "And what secrets do you guard, I wonder?" Before Ilara could respond, a commotion near the hall's entrance drew their attention. A group of guards entered, surrounding a figure in chains, Lord Cassius, his face contorted with rage. Behind him, Lady Isolde followed in similar restraints, her beauty now marred by fury. The queen rose, displeasure evident in her rigid posture. "I did not order the prisoners brought to the feast." The captain of the guard bowed deeply. "Forgive me, your majesty." Lord Cassius insisted upon the ancient right of public defense before the 5 clans. As tonight all clans are assembled, he demands to be heard. Whispers erupted throughout the hall. The right of public defense was indeed ancient, older than Queen Lysithea's reign, and could not be denied without violating traditions that predated even vampire rule. The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well. Speak your piece, Cassius, but choose your words with care. They may be your last. Lord Cassius stepped forward, chains clinking with each movement. Despite his captivity, he maintained an air of arrogance, his gaze sweeping the assembled nobility before settling on Ilara with undisguised hatred. "Esteemed leaders of the 5 clans," he began, his voice strong despite his circumstances, "I stand before you falsely accused of treason, on the word of a human servant whose motives remain conveniently unexamined." He turned to address the assembly directly. "Ask yourselves, why would a lowly servant suddenly take interest in court politics? Why would she risk death to warn the Queen? The answer is simple. She was placed here as a spy." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Cassius continued. "This human serves interests beyond our realm. She has infiltrated Blackmere to sow discord among us on the very night our Queen plans to name her successor." "Baseless accusations," Queen Lysithea interrupted coldly. "The poison was found in the goblet, just as she warned." "A poison planted by her own hand, no doubt," Cassius countered, "or perhaps by her co-conspirators." "And who might these conspirators be?" Lord Darius asked, his tone skeptical. Cassius smiled thinly. "Who benefits most from destabilizing Blackmere on the eve of succession? I suggest the Eastern clan has sent their human puppet to ensure Queen Lysithea names a weak successor, or better yet, no successor at all." Lord Carven of the Eastern clan stood abruptly, his pale features flushed with anger. "You dare accuse my clan of such treachery? We have honored the peace for 3 centuries. "Peace built on the bones of my father," Cassius retorted. "The true heir to Blackmere, before your clan's machinations led to his execution." The hall erupted in shouts and accusations as centuries-old grievances resurfaced. Queen Lysithea stood, power radiating from her slender form. "Silence," she commanded, and the hall obeyed instantly. "Cassius seeks to distract us from his own guilt by reviving ancient conflicts. I will not allow it." She descended from the dais, approaching Lord Cassius with measured steps. "You speak of my uncle's execution as though it were unjust. Have you forgotten his crimes? The massacres of human villages that threatened our very existence by bringing human hunters to our borders." "Necessary culling," Cassius spat. "Humans are food and labor. Nothing more. Your sentimentality weakens our kind." The Queen's eyes flashed dangerously. "And there we have the truth of it, your true objection to my rule. Not that I am unfit, but that I see humans as more than livestock." She turned to address the hall. "This is why Lord Cassius is unfit for succession. His vision would return us to the days of human hunting parties burning our havens, of endless war instead of the peace we have cultivated." Ilara sat frozen, watching the political drama unfold. Lord Cassius's accusations had shifted attention from her to the Eastern clan, creating exactly the kind of discord he claimed she had been sent to sow. Yet even as the nobility argued amongst themselves, she noticed Lady Isolde watching her with calculating eyes. A servant approached the high table, bowing before the Queen. "Your Majesty, a message has arrived from the border. It requires your immediate attention." The Queen frowned, taking the sealed missive. As she read, her expression darkened. "It seems our discussion of human-vampire relations is particularly timely," she announced to the hall. "A human village on our western border has been massacred, drained entirely of blood in a ritual pattern not seen in centuries." Stunned silence fell over the assembly. "The Eastern Death Mark," Lord Darius identified, turning accusingly toward Lord Carven. "Impossible," Lord Carven protested. "My clan abandoned those practices generations ago." "Or so you claimed," someone shouted from the crowd. As arguments erupted anew, Ilara noticed something that made her blood run cold. Lady Isolde was smiling. Not the furious scowl of a captured conspirator, but the satisfied smile of someone watching a plan unfold perfectly. Their eyes met briefly across the hall, and in that moment, Ilara understood. This had been the plan all along. not merely to assassinate the queen, but to ensure that if that failed, the clans would still be thrown into conflict. Ilara leaned toward the queen, who was watching the growing chaos with mounting concern. "Your Majesty," she whispered urgently, "I believe the border attack is connected to Lord Cassius's plot. Lady Isolde seems pleased by this news." The queen's violet eyes narrowed as she observed her former handmaiden. "You think they arranged this massacre as a contingency?" "To ensure discord among the clans, regardless of whether the assassination succeeded," Ilara confirmed. "The timing is too convenient." Queen Lysithea studied Ilara's face intently. "You continue to see what others miss," she murmured. Then, louder, she addressed the hall once more. "Enough. This bickering serves only those who wish to see our alliance crumble. The border attack will be investigated thoroughly before accusations are leveled." She gestured to the guards. "Return the prisoners to the dungeons. Their fate will be decided after I have named my successor and addressed this new threat." As Lord Cassius was dragged away, he locked eyes with Ilara. "This isn't over, human," he hissed, loud enough for her alone to hear. "You've merely stepped from shadow into a much deadlier game." After the prisoners were removed, the queen called for music to restore the feast's celebratory atmosphere. As strained conversations resumed around the hall, Lord Darius approached the high table, bowing before Queen Lysithea. "Your Majesty, might I borrow your intriguing human companion for a dance? I find myself curious about one who notices so much." The queen glanced at Ilara, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "That would depend on whether she wishes to dance." All eyes turned to Ilara, who felt a flush rising to her cheeks. She had never danced at a vampire court, had never even imagined being invited to. Yet refusing a clan lord would be unthinkable. "I would be honored, my lord," she said, rising from her seat, "though I must warn you I've had little practice." "I find that hard to believe," Lord Darius replied, offering his hand. "Someone who moves unseen through a castle of predators must possess exceptional grace." He led her to the center of the hall, where other couples had begun to dance to the haunting melody played by musicians in the gallery above. His hand was cool against hers, his movements fluid, as he guided her through the unfamiliar steps. "You've caused quite a stir tonight," he observed, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Many wonder what Queen Lysithea intends for you." "I wonder the same, my lord," Ilara admitted. "Darius, please, at least while we dance." His scarred face softened momentarily. "I've known Lysithea for 2 centuries. She doesn't bestow favor randomly, nor does she forgive betrayal. You've earned one and avoided the other. A rare accomplishment." They turned in time with the music, and Ilara found herself adapting to the rhythm more easily than expected. "You speak as though you know her well." "We were allied during the last succession crisis," he replied, "before the peace treaty." "Dark times?" Ilara hesitated, then asked the question burning in her mind. "Do you believe, Lord Cassius, that I'm a spy?" Darius studied her face as they moved across the floor. "I believe you are exactly what the Queen says. A servant who saw too much, and, unlike most, chose to act on it. The more interesting question is why. I told the Queen because it was right. And is that the complete truth, Ilara?" His gaze was penetrating, as if he could see beyond her carefully constructed facade. "Few act solely for righteousness, particularly those who have learned to survive by being invisible." Before she could answer, the music ended, and Darius bowed formally. "Thank you for the dance. I look forward to seeing what role you play in the coming days." As he escorted her back to the high table, Ilara noticed Thorn signaling discreetly from a side door. She turned to the Queen. "Your Majesty, might I be excused briefly?" The Queen followed her gaze to Thorn, then nodded slightly. "Don't wander far. The succession announcement comes soon." Ilara made her way through the crowd, acutely aware of the stares following her. When she reached Thorn, he pulled her into an alcove. "What in the seven hells are you doing, ghost girl?" he hissed, his normally kind face taut with worry. "You've painted a target on your back the size of the castle." "I had no choice," Ilara defended. "They were going to kill the Queen." "And now Lord Cassius wants to kill you," Thorn retorted. "You think those chains will hold him for long? He has allies everywhere." "The Queen is protecting me, for now," Thorn agreed grimly. "But after tonight? Queens use people, Ilara. They don't befriend them." Ilara frowned. "You know something. Tell me." Thorn glanced around, then leaned closer. "There are rumors among the kitchen staff. The border massacre. It's not the first. 3 smaller villages were attacked in the past month, but the news was suppressed. Why would the Queen hide such attacks?" "Not the Queen," Thorn corrected. "Lord Cassius. The villages were under his direct protection. He claimed they were attacked by rogue vampires, but some survivors spoke of organized raids." Ilara's mind raced. If Cassius orchestrated attacks on his own territories, then blamed the Eastern clan, Thorn finished, he'd have justification for breaking the peace treaty after taking the throne. A cold dread settled in Ilara's stomach. The assassination attempt was just one part of a larger plan. Even from the dungeon, he's manipulating the clans toward war. Exactly. And you're now at the center of court politics, with no allies and no protection beyond the Queen's temporary favor. Thorn gripped her shoulders. "You need to disappear, Ilara. Tonight, before the succession is announced." "I can't just leave," she protested. "The Queen expects me to return." "Listen to me," Thorn urged, his voice dropping even lower. "There's something else you should know. The Queen's successor—" A shadow fell across the alcove, cutting off Thorn's words. They turned to find Lady Isolde standing there, somehow free of her chains, her beautiful face twisted in malice. "How touching," she purred. "The ghost girl and the cook plotting together. I wondered who else might be involved in your little scheme." "How did you escape?" Ilara demanded, instinctively stepping in front of Thorn. Lady Isolde smiled, revealing fangs that seemed longer than before. "I have friends in more places than the dungeons, my dear. And now I believe it's time we finished our earlier conversation, without the Queen's interference." She moved with blinding speed, seizing Ilara by the throat and slamming her against the wall. "You should have stayed invisible," she hissed, her grip tightening. "Now everyone will watch you die." Lady Isolde's grip tightened around Ilara's throat, her nails lengthening into talons that pricked the skin. Black spots danced at the edges of Ilara's vision as she struggled, her fingers clawing uselessly at the vampire's iron hold. "Get away from her!" Thorn lunged forward with a serving knife he'd pulled from his apron. Before he could strike, Lady Isolde flung out her free hand, sending him crashing against the opposite wall with supernatural strength. Ilara felt herself slipping into darkness, her lungs burning for air. Then suddenly, the pressure vanished. She collapsed to the floor, gasping as Lady Isolde shrieked in pain. Through watering eyes, Ilara saw Thorn on his knees, clutching his side but still conscious. Between them stood Lord Darius, his hand gripping Lady Isolde's wrist at an unnatural angle, silvery liquid dripping from a blade he pressed against her throat. "Silver-infused steel," he explained calmly as Lady Isolde hissed in pain. "Quite rare, quite effective, a necessity when dealing with ambitious vampires." "This doesn't concern you, Northerner," Lady Isolde snarled, though she remained still beneath the threatening blade. "When you attack a guest of Queen Lysithea during peace negotiations, you make it the concern of all 5 clans." Lord Darius replied. He glanced at Ilara. "Can you stand?" Ilara nodded, rising shakily to her feet. Her throat burned where Lady Isolde's fingers had pressed, and she could feel blood trickling from the small puncture wounds left by those talon-like nails. "Guards!" Lord Darius called, his voice carrying without shouting. A vampire lord's privilege. Two of the Queen's personal guard appeared almost instantly, eyes widening at the scene before them. "Lady Isolde has escaped custody and attacked the Queen's honored guest," Darius explained. "Take her to the secure holding cells, not the regular dungeons, and inform Her Majesty immediately." As the guards escorted the fuming Lady Isolde away, Darius knelt beside Thorn. "Your ribs are broken," he observed, examining the cook with clinical detachment. 3, possibly 4. 5, Thorn grunted, his face pale with pain. "Not my first encounter with angry nobility." Darius raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Instead, he helped Thorn to his feet and guided him to a nearby chair. "Stay here. I'll send a healer." Turning back to Elara, he studied the wounds on her neck. "Those will need attention as well. Isolde's talons often carry a slow-acting venom, not lethal, but exceedingly unpleasant if left untreated." Ilara's hand flew to her throat. "Venom. A trait particular to her bloodline," Darius explained. "Few outside the court know of it." His eyes narrowed. "Which raises the question of how she escaped the dungeons so quickly, and why she came directly for you instead of fleeing the castle." "She wanted to silence me," Elara said, her voice raspy from the assault, "because I know more than I've revealed." Thorn made a warning sound, but Elara shook her head. "No, Thorn. The time for hiding is past." She met Darius's curious gaze. "The village massacre reported tonight isn't the first. There have been others, all in territories under Lord Cassius's protection." Darius's expression darkened. "You're suggesting Cassius orchestrated attacks on his own people to justify breaking the peace treaty once he took power?" Elara confirmed. "The assassination attempt was just one part of a larger strategy to start a war with the Eastern clan." "Bold accusations," Darius murmured, though he didn't sound disbelieving. "And now both conspirators have focused their considerable rage on you." He studied her with renewed interest. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish to place yourself at the center of vampire politics, Elara." "I didn't choose this position," she replied. "Yet here you stand," he countered, "dressed in finery, dancing with clan lords, and uncovering plots that have escaped the notice of those who've lived centuries." A faint smile crossed his scarred features. "I'm beginning to understand why Lysithea finds you so intriguing." Before Elara could respond, a commotion arose from the main hall. The music had stopped, and Queen Lysithea's voice rang out, calling for order. "It seems the announcement is about to begin," Darius observed. "We should return." "I can't leave Thorn," Elara protested, looking at the cook who was now breathing in shallow gasps, his face grey with pain. "Go," Thorn managed. "This moment. It's important." "More than you know." Darius called over a servant and instructed them to fetch the court physician for Thorn immediately. Then he offered his arm to Elara. "Shall we?" With a last concerned glance at Thorn, Elara reluctantly allowed Darius to escort her back to the grand hall. The crowd parted before them, whispers following in their wake as they noticed the wounds on Elara's neck. Queen Lysithea stood on the dais, resplendent and terrible in her power. Her eyes locked on Elara, taking in her disheveled appearance and the marks on her throat. Something dangerous flashed across her features before her expression smoothed once more. "Bring Lady Isolde before me," she commanded, as Elara and Darius reached the foot of the dais. "I would deal with this breach myself." The guards returned moments later with Lady Isolde, who no longer struggled but maintained a defiant posture despite her restraints. The hall fell silent as the Queen descended the steps to stand before her former handmaiden. "You were my companion for 80 years, Queen Lysithea said, her voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "You attended my most private moments, shared my confidence, enjoyed my protection." Her tone hardened. "And you repaid that trust with treachery twice over." Lady Isolde raised her chin. "I served faithfully for decades, while you denied me the only thing I truly wanted." "And what was that?" "Power," Isolde hissed. "Recognition, the right to rise beyond a handmaiden's station." The queen's expression remained impassive. "So you conspired with Cassius to murder me and ignite war among the clans, and when captured, you escaped to silence the one who exposed you." She glanced briefly at Ilara. "Did it never occur to you to simply ask for advancement?" Confusion flickered across Isolde's perfect features. "What? In 80 years you never once requested greater responsibilities or title," the queen continued. "You were content to serve in my shadows, or so it seemed, until ambition consumed you." She sighed, an almost human gesture. "Tonight, I had planned to reward loyal service with positions of honor in the new era of Blackmere. You might have stood among them, had you but patience." Isolde's composure cracked, uncertainty replacing her defiance. "You lie. You never intended—" "We shall never know, shall we?" Queen Lysithea cut her off. "Your choices have determined your fate." She turned to address the assembled nobility. "Lady Isolde's attack on a protected guest violates not only Blackmere's laws, but the ancient codes of hospitality that govern interactions between clans. I invoke the right of immediate judgment." A murmur ran through the crowd. The right of immediate judgment was rarely exercised, even by a queen as powerful as Lysithea. It bypassed the usual councils and deliberations, placing life and death solely in the sovereign's hands. "Does any clan lord object?" the queen asked, surveying the hall. Lord Carven of the Eastern clan stepped forward. "Before judgment is passed, I would know if Lady Isolde was involved in falsely implicating my clan in border massacres. The Eastern Deathmark is a grave accusation." Queen Lysithea turned back to Isolde. "Answer truthfully, and I may show mercy. Were the attacks orchestrated to frame the Eastern clan?" Isolde's eyes darted between the queen and Lord Cassius's allies, scattered throughout the hall. Finally, she straightened. "Yes," she admitted. "Cassius arranged everything. The villages were sacrificed to provide justification for war once he took the throne." Outrage erupted from the Eastern clan's delegation, while Cassius's supporters shouted denials and counter-accusations. Queen Lysithea raised her hand, and silence fell once more. "For crimes of high treason, attempted regicide, and violation of the peace accords, I sentence Lady Isolde to the final death," she pronounced. "Let it be carried out at dawn." The guards moved to take Isolde away, but she suddenly lunged forward, breaking one arm free with desperate strength. "If I die, I won't go alone," she screamed, fingers clawing toward Ilara. Before anyone could react, Queen Lysithea moved with blinding speed, her hand plunging into Lady Isolde's chest. Isolde's eyes widened in shock as the queen withdrew her hand, clutching a pulsating, blackened heart. "Your time is ended," the queen said simply, crushing the organ in her fist. Lady Isolde crumbled to ash before the stunned assembly, the only sound the soft patter of dust settling on the marble floor. Queen Lysithea calmly wiped her bloodied hand on a cloth offered by a servant, then returned to the dais as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Ilara stood frozen, the brutal execution searing itself into her memory. This was the true face of vampire justice. Swift, merciless, final. A reminder that beneath the court's civilized veneer lay predators governed by ancient primal laws. "Now," the queen continued, "we shall proceed with the intended purpose of tonight's gathering." She gestured, and servants brought forth an ornate silver box inlaid with obsidian. The box was placed on a pedestal before the throne, and the queen opened it with ceremonial slowness, removing a circlet of twisted silver set with a single black diamond. "For 3 centuries, I have ruled Blackmere," Queen Lysithea addressed the assembly. "I have maintained peace among our clans, balanced the needs of vampires with the protection of our human territories, and ensured our kind's survival in an increasingly hostile world. But even immortals must eventually step aside for new vision, new leadership." She held up the circlet, which caught the candlelight in hypnotic patterns. "This crown, forged from the weapons that once threatened our extinction, symbolizes both our vulnerability and our strength. Tonight, I name the one who shall wear it after me. Tension filled the hall as every vampire present straightened, attention fixed on the Queen. Political alliances centuries in the making would be validated or shattered in the next moment. Queen Lysithia's violet eyes swept the hall once, then settled on Ilara. "Step forward, human." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly as Ilara, heart thundering in her chest, moved toward the dais. Confusion and disbelief gave way to outrage among many of the nobles. "Impossible!" someone shouted. "A human cannot rule vampires!" "Sacrilege!" called another voice. Lord Darius stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Your Majesty, while none question your wisdom, perhaps you might elaborate on this unprecedented choice." Queen Lysithia's lips curved in a cold smile. "Who said anything about her ruling as she is?" Understanding dawned on Ilara with horrifying clarity. The Queen's interest, the elaborate transformation, the position of honor, none of it had been mere reward for preventing an assassination. "You intend to turn me," she whispered, though in the sudden silence her words carried throughout the hall. "Of course," the Queen replied, as if it were the most obvious conclusion. "You possess qualities I have sought for centuries in a successor: perception, courage, adaptability. You see what others overlook and act when others hesitate." She descended the steps until she stood directly before Ilara. "But most importantly, you remember what it means to be human. That perspective is what our kind increasingly lacks, and what will be needed in the coming age." Ilara's mind raced. Becoming a vampire had never crossed her mind as a possibility or a desire. To be immortal, to subsist on blood, to watch everyone she knew age and die while she remained unchanged. The thought was both terrifying and disorienting. "I never agreed to this," she said, finding her voice despite her shock. "No," the Queen acknowledged, "but you will. Because deep down, you understand that power is the only true protection in this world. You've lived as prey. Now you're being offered the chance to become a predator." She tilted her head, studying Ilara with ancient eyes. "Unless you prefer to return to invisibility, scrubbing floors, while the world's fate is decided without you." Before Ilara could respond, the great doors of the hall burst open. A vampire soldier staggered in, his armor covered in blood. "Your Majesty," he gasped, "we're under attack." Queen Lysithia whirled toward him. "Explain." "Lord Cassius has escaped," the soldier reported. "He's released the prisoners from the dungeons and armed them. They've already breached the eastern defenses." As if to confirm his words, a distant explosion shook the castle, sending dust cascading from the vaulted ceiling. Panic erupted as nobles rushed toward exits or drew weapons hidden beneath fine clothing. "Impossible," the Queen hissed. "The dungeons were heavily guarded." "Treachery from within," Lord Darius suggested, already drawing his silver-infused blade. "Cassius's influence runs deeper than we realized." Queen Lysithia's face hardened with resolve. "Secure the hall," she commanded the guards. "No one enters or leaves without my permission." She turned to the clan lords. "Gentlemen, it seems we must defend our peace treaty quite literally tonight." Another explosion rocked the castle, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sounds of fighting in the corridors beyond. The Queen placed the circlet back in its box and handed it to a trusted guard. "Take this to my private chambers," she instructed. "Protect it with your life." As chaos enveloped the grand hall, with vampires rushing to defensive positions and servants cowering in corners, Ilara felt a hand close around her wrist. She turned to find Thorn beside her, still grimacing in pain but upright. "We need to leave," he urged quietly. "Now, while everyone's distracted." "I can't just run," Ilara protested. "You don't understand," Thorn insisted, his eyes desperate. "Cassius isn't just after the throne. He wants you specifically." "Me? Why would he?" "Because of who you are," Thorn cut her off. "Who you really are." Ilara stared at him in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Before Thorn could answer, a massive section of the ceiling collapsed, showering the hall with stone and debris. Through the gaping hole descended a dozen vampires armed with crossbows and blades, their eyes gleaming with bloodlust. At their center stood Lord Cassius, no longer the aristocratic noble, but a creature of nightmare. His features partially transformed into something bat-like and monstrous. In his hand, he clutched a weapon Ilara had never seen before, a sword that pulsed with sickly green light. "Lysithea!" he roared, his voice distorted and inhuman. "Your reign ends tonight!" "Defend the Queen!" Lord Darius shouted, rallying the loyal guards as battle erupted throughout the hall. Queen Lysithea herself moved with lethal grace, tearing through the first attackers who reached her like they were made of paper. But her eyes sought out Ilara across the chaos, and when their gazes met, Ilara saw something unexpected. Not anger or command, but genuine concern. "Run!" the Queen mouthed silently. A crossbow bolt whistled past Ilara's ear, embedding itself in the wall behind her. Thorn pulled her down behind an overturned table as more projectiles flew through the air. "We have to get to the Eastern Passage," he said urgently. "There's a way out that few know about." "But the Queen cannot protect you if she falls," Thorn finished, and Cassius came prepared. He nodded toward the glowing sword. "That weapon is ancient, forged specifically to kill vampire royalty. If he reaches her with it—" Another explosion shook the foundation of the castle itself. Through the smoke and chaos, Ilara saw Lord Cassius cutting a path directly toward the Queen, the magical sword leaving trails of venomous light in its wake. "Tell me who I am," Ilara demanded, gripping Thorn's arm. "Why does Cassius want me?" Thorn's face contorted with indecision before he finally relented. "Because you're not just a servant, Ilara. You never were." He took a deep breath. "You're Queen Lysithea's daughter." The words struck Ilara like a physical blow. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Vampires can't have children, and I'm human. I'm half human," Thorn corrected. "Born before Lysithea's transformation, hidden away for centuries, and then deliberately placed in Blackmere as a servant to learn the court from its shadows." His eyes held both apology and urgency. "I was assigned to watch over you, to make sure you survived until the Queen deemed it time to reveal your identity." The world seemed to tilt beneath Ilara as pieces fell into place. The Queen's interest, her immediate trust in Ilara's word over her longtime handmaidens, the succession plan that had shocked the court. She wasn't planning to turn me, Ilara realized. She was planning to reveal me. "Yes," Thorn confirmed. "But if Cassius kills you before that happens, his claim to the throne stands. We need to get you out of here, now." As if summoned by their conversation, Lord Cassius's monstrous form suddenly loomed over them, having cut through the battle to reach their hiding place. His distorted face split in a grotesque smile as he laid eyes on Ilara. "The Queen's secret," he hissed, raising the glowing sword. "Found at last." Lord Cassius's sword descended in a vicious arc, the sickly green light carving through the air. In that moment, time seemed to slow for Ilara. She saw Thorn lunging in front of her despite his injuries, saw the gleaming blade mere inches from ending them both, and something inside her awakened. Power surged through her veins, hot and electric. Ilara threw up her hand instinctively, and a shockwave erupted from her palm, sending Lord Cassius flying backward into a stone pillar. The impact cracked the ancient column, dust and debris raining down as the vampire lord crumpled momentarily to the floor. What was that?" Ilara gasped, staring at her trembling hand. "The blood awakens," Thorn whispered, his eyes wide with wonder and fear. "Your mother's power, dormant until needed." Across the hall, Queen Lysithea paused in her battle, her violet eyes finding Ilara through the chaos. Even from a distance, Ilara could see the mix of pride and anguish in that gaze. The look of a mother who had kept herself distant for her child's protection, now watching as that protection crumbled. "Go!" Thorn urged, pulling Ilara toward a tapestry hanging on the far wall. "The passage is behind here. It leads to the North Woods." They stumbled through the battlefield, dodging clashing vampires and flying debris. The grand hall had transformed into a vision of hell. Blood slicked the marble floors, fires sparked from overturned candelabras, and the air filled with the sounds of combat and dying. Lord Cassius recovered quickly, his monstrous features contorted with rage. "Seize her," he commanded his followers, pointing one clawed hand at Ilara. "The half-breed must not escape." 3 vampires broke from their battles to pursue her, moving with preternatural speed. Before they could reach her, Lord Darius intercepted them, his silver-infused blade slicing through the first attacker with lethal precision. "Go with your protector, Ilara," he called, engaging the other 2 in combat. "This is not your battle. Not yet." Ilara hesitated, torn between flight and an inexplicable urge to stay and fight. The power still hummed beneath her skin, foreign yet familiar, like a forgotten language suddenly remembered. "Your mother has defended you for centuries," Thorn said, reading her conflict. "Honor her sacrifice by surviving." With a last glance toward Queen Lysithea, now surrounded by enemies yet fighting with terrifying elegance, Ilara allowed Thorn to pull her behind the tapestry. A narrow stone passage yawned before them, dank and dark but blessedly empty. "This way," Thorn directed, lighting a torch from a sconce just inside the entrance. "These tunnels were built during the human rebellions, centuries ago. They'll take us beyond the castle walls." They hurried through the winding passage, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Ilara's mind raced faster than her feet, struggling to process Thorn's revelation. "If what you say is true, if I'm her daughter, why keep me as a servant? Why the deception?" Thorn's torch cast dancing shadows as they descended deeper into the tunnel network. "Protection through obscurity. The Queen has many enemies who would use you against her, and she needed you to understand the court from all perspectives, not just from privilege. So my entire life has been a lie?" Ilara's voice broke. "A test?" "Not a lie," Thorn corrected gently. "A preparation. She always intended to reveal you once you were ready, once you understood the responsibilities that come with power." A distant rumble shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. The battle was intensifying above them. "We need to go back," Ilara said suddenly, stopping in her tracks. "She needs help. Your mother has survived 3 centuries of assassination attempts and power struggles," Thorn reminded her. "She can handle Cassius." "Not with that sword," Ilara countered. "You said it yourself. It was forged to kill vampire royalty." She turned back toward the way they had come. "And not alone. I felt the power, Thorn. I can help her." "You don't know how to control it," Thorn argued. "You could just as easily get yourself killed, and then all her sacrifices would be for nothing." Another explosion rocked the tunnel, more violent than before. Small stones and dirt showered down upon them. "He's using black powder charges," Thorn realized with horror. "He means to bring down the entire castle." That decided Ilara. "I won't run while my mother dies defending me." She started back up the tunnel, her newfound determination lending speed to her steps. Thorn caught her arm. "Wait, there's another way to help, a faster route to the Queen's side." He pointed down a branching tunnel she hadn't noticed. "This leads to her private chambers. There's something there you'll need if you're truly determined to fight." They raced down the narrow offshoot, emerging minutes later through a hidden door in the Queen's dressing chamber. The room was untouched by the violence ravaging the castle, eerily peaceful with its silks and perfumes. Thorn hurried to an ornate wardrobe, pressing a hidden latch that revealed a secret compartment. From within, he withdrew a wooden box inlaid with silver runes. "The Queen prepared this for you," he explained, placing it in Ilara's hands. "For the day you would learn your heritage." The box felt warm against her palms, as if responding to her touch. When she lifted the lid, she found a slender dagger nestled in black velvet. Its blade gleamed with an inner light, the hilt crafted of silver and obsidian. "This is Nightshard," Thorn said reverently, "forged from the same materials as Cassius's sword, but with a different purpose. While his weapon destroys vampire essence, this one can channel and focus your inherited powers." Ilara lifted the dagger, feeling it hum in resonance with the energy still coursing through her veins. "How do I use it?" "The Queen would have instructed you properly given time," Thorn said with regret. "I know only that it responds to your blood and will." A crash from below signaled that the fighting had spread throughout the castle. There was no time for lessons or practice. "Stay here," Ilara told Thorn. "Your ribs need tending, and I'll move faster alone." "I was charged with protecting you," he protested. "And you have," she assured him. "Now let me protect her." Before he could argue further, Ilara slipped out of the chamber, the dagger concealed in the folds of her gown. She moved through the castle corridors with the same invisibility she had perfected as a servant, though now it was enhanced by something more, a subtle power that bent shadows around her, muffled her footsteps, and clouded observing eyes. The grand hall, when she reached it, had transformed into a battlefield strewn with the wounded and dead. The fighting had spread outward, leaving pockets of combat scattered throughout the vast chamber. Through the haze of smoke and dust, Ilara spotted Queen Lysithea, backed against the dais, facing Lord Cassius and 3 of his most loyal followers. The queen was wounded, silver-tinged blood seeping from gashes in her side and shoulder, yet she still fought with deadly precision, her movements a blur as she held her attackers at bay. But Ilara could see she was weakening, the magical sword in Cassius's hand sapping her strength even when it didn't make direct contact. Lord Darius fought nearby, trying to reach the queen's side, but blocked by a wall of enemy combatants. The other clan lords had either fallen or fled, their loyalties tested, and many found wanting in the face of Cassius's unexpected assault. Ilara crept along the edge of the hall, using overturned tables and fallen debris as cover. She clutched Nightshard in her palm, feeling it warm to her touch, responding to her proximity to danger. Her mother's blood, vampire blood, sang in her veins, heightening her senses until she could hear heartbeats, smell fear and bloodlust mingling in the air. Lord Cassius raised his sword for another attack. "The age of coexistence dies with you, Lysithea," he snarled. "Humans are cattle, nothing more. Your compassion has made our kind weak." Queen Lysithea straightened despite her wounds, regal even in her darkest hour. "You understand nothing, Cassius. Our survival has always depended on balance. Break it, and humans will hunt us to extinction, as they nearly did before." "Let them try," he laughed, gesturing to the destruction around them. "We are gods among insects." "You are a fool among monsters," the queen replied coldly. His face contorted with rage, Cassius lunged forward, the poisonous green sword aimed at the queen's heart. In that moment, Ilara stepped from the shadows. "Mother!" she called, her voice ringing clear above the chaos. Everyone froze. The queen's eyes widened in mingled horror and pride. Cassius turned, momentarily distracted by the unexpected intervention. It was all the opening Ilara needed. She raised Nightshard and drew the blade across her palm without hesitation. Her blood, bright crimson yet somehow sparkling with an inner light, coated the dagger, which began to glow with brilliant silver radiance. "Impossible," Cassius breathed, his monstrous features slack with shock. "The bloodline was ended. The child died centuries ago." "I was hidden, not dead," Ilara replied, advancing steadily. The dagger pulsed in her hand, power flowing from it into her body and back again in an endless circuit. "And I won't allow you to destroy what my mother has built." Cassius recovered quickly, his surprise turning to calculating malice. "Even better," he growled. "I'll kill you both and end the bloodline permanently." He signaled to his followers to deal with the queen while he turned his full attention to Ilara. The magical sword hummed with sickly light as he advanced on her, its aura of wrongness making her skin crawl. "You might have vampire blood, half-breed," he taunted, "but you're untrained, untested. What hope do you have against centuries of combat experience?" "She has me," came a voice from behind him. Lord Darius had broken through his opponents at last, his silver blade dripping with dark blood. He stepped to Ilara's side, his scarred face set with determination. "The Northern Clan stands with Queen Lysithea and her heir," he declared loudly enough for all combatants to hear. More voices joined in, survivors from the Eastern Clan, Western loyalists, even Southern nobles, who had remained neutral until now stepped forward, rallying around Ilara and Darius. Cassius's advantage began to crumble as his supporters, seeing the tide turn, either redoubled their attacks in desperation or quietly melted away into the shadows. "Traitors," Cassius howled. "You would follow a human-tainted bloodline?" "We follow strength tempered with wisdom," Lord Darius replied. "Something you've never understood." With a roar of frustration, Cassius abandoned strategy for brute force. He charged at Ilara, the magical sword leaving trails of venomous light in its wake. Ilara raised Nightshard instinctively. The blades met in a shower of sparks, green against silver, destruction against creation. The impact sent a shockwave through the hall, knocking lesser vampires off their feet and shattering the few remaining windows. Power surged through Ilara, no longer foreign but fully awakened. She felt her mother's blood responding to danger, ancient magic uncoiling within her human frame. Her vision sharpened until she could see the individual motes of dust dancing in the air. Her reflexes quickened until Cassius's movements seemed almost sluggish. They exchanged blows in a deadly dance. Cassius's strength and experience matched against Ilara's newfound power and Nightshard's magic. Each clash of their weapons released bursts of competing energies, scorching the marble floor and sending currents of electricity arcing through the air. From the corner of her eye, Ilara saw Queen Lysithea fighting her way toward them, determined to protect her daughter despite her wounds. Lord Darius guarded the Queen's flank, his silver blade a blur as he cut down any who approached. "You fight well for a half-breed," Cassius grudgingly acknowledged as they circled each other. "But you can't win. Even if you defeat me, the old ways die tonight. Too many have seen the Queen's weakness now." "They've seen her strength," Ilara countered, "and her willingness to sacrifice for those she protects. That's not weakness, Lord Cassius. It's the highest form of power." She feinted left, then darted right, faster than human reflexes should allow. Nightshard sliced through Cassius's guard, opening a wound across his chest that sizzled and refused to close. He howled in pain and rage, his transformation progressing further in his fury. Bat-like wings erupted from his back, tearing through his fine clothing. His face elongated, becoming more bestial, more monstrous. "If I can't have the throne," he snarled, "no one shall." He raised his free hand toward the ceiling, where charges of black powder had been placed throughout the support structures. A word of power, ancient and forbidden, tore from his throat. The charges detonated simultaneously, and the castle's great dome began to collapse. Massive blocks of stone plummeted toward the hall, threatening to crush everyone below. Vampires scattered, loyalty forgotten in the face of destruction. Queen Lysithea reached Ilara's side, just as the ceiling gave way above them. Without hesitation, she threw herself over her daughter, using her body as a shield. "No!" Ilara cried. In that moment of desperation, Nightshard blazed with blinding light. Time seemed to slow around them as Ilara raised the dagger high, her mother's blood in her veins and her own blood on the blade creating a perfect circuit of power. A dome of silvery energy expanded outward from where they stood, catching the falling stones and suspending them in mid-air. Lord Cassius stared in disbelief at the manifestation of power he had never imagined possible. His momentary distraction was fatal. Lord Darius's silver blade swept through his neck in one clean stroke, separating his head from his body. The magical sword clattered to the floor as Cassius crumbled to ash, his 3 centuries of existence ending in an instant. The strain of holding back the collapsing ceiling began to tell on Ilara. Sweat beaded on her brow, and her arms trembled with effort. Queen Lysithea placed her hands over her daughters, lending her ancient strength to Ilara's raw power. "Together," the Queen said softly. With their combined will, they directed the energy dome upward, guiding the falling stones back into position. The magic of Nightshard, fueled by their shared bloodline, sealed the breaks and cracks, restructuring what had been broken. The dome of the Grand Hall reformed before the astonished eyes of all present, stronger than before. When the last stone settled into place, Ilara's knees buckled. The Queen caught her before she could fall, holding her daughter properly for the first time in centuries. "My daughter," Queen Lysithea whispered, cradling Ilara's face in her cool hands. "My brave, beautiful daughter." Lord Darius approached, bowing deeply before them both. "The battle is won, Your Majesty. Cassius's remaining followers have surrendered or fled." Around them, the surviving nobles gathered, their expressions ranging from awe to calculation as they absorbed the knight's revelations. Ilara could read their thoughts as clearly as if they'd spoken aloud. A half-human heir, unprecedented power, ancient bloodlines reawakened. Queen Lysithea rose to her full height, one arm still supporting Ilara. "Lords and ladies of the 5 clans," she addressed them, her voice carrying effortlessly through the damaged hall. "Tonight you have witnessed both treachery and loyalty, destruction and renewal. You have also witnessed the unveiling of my successor, my daughter, hidden for her protection until she was ready to take her place among us." Murmurs spread through the assembly, but none dared object openly after what they had just witnessed. "Ilara possesses qualities our kind has long forgotten. Compassion tempered with strength, human understanding wedded to vampire power. In her, the future of Blackmere, indeed of all 5 clans, finds its hope." Lord Darius stepped forward, still holding his bloodied blade. "The Northern clan acknowledges Queen Lysithea's heir and pledges loyalty to her succession." One by one, the surviving clan lords followed suit, bending knee before Ilara, some with genuine respect, others with pragmatic acceptance of new realities. As dawn approached, casting pale light through the broken windows, Queen Lysithea led Ilara to the throne. The silver circlet awaited, placed there by a loyal guard who had protected it throughout the night's chaos. "This was always meant for you," the Queen told her softly, "not because you are my daughter, but because you are the bridge between 2 worlds that must find harmony or face extinction." Ilara looked out at the gathered court, at Thorn, who had emerged from hiding and watched with tearful pride, at Lord Darius, whose allegiance had proven true in the darkest hour, at the nobles and servants alike, all waiting to see what new era would dawn with the rising sun. "I have so much to learn," she whispered to her mother. Queen Lysithea smiled, the first truly warm expression Ilara had ever seen on her face. "And I have centuries of motherhood to catch up on. We will learn together." As the circlet was placed upon her head, Ilara felt the weight of responsibility settling alongside it. She was neither fully human nor fully vampire, neither servant nor royal by training. She existed in the in-between spaces, the shadows where understanding bloomed. Perhaps that was exactly what Blackmere needed. Someone who had known invisibility and visibility, powerlessness and power, who could bridge the divide between human and vampire, not through conquest, but through comprehension. The first rays of dawn touched the reformed dome of the Grand Hall, casting rainbow light through the shattered fragments of glass that remained in the windows. It illuminated Ilara as she stood before the court, Nightshard at her belt and her mother at her side. "The night has been long," she addressed them, finding strength in her newly discovered voice, "but together we will build the dawn."